Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome. We'll just take a minute to let everybody get settled before we jump into the event of the day, which we have been very much looking forward to. I'm happy to see that there are 70 people joining us today. Okay, and we will start shortly here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Joanna Kenya Baker, and I will be your host for the day. I look forward to spending time with you this evening, and this is a really incredible conversation that we have been looking forward to talking about today. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared on our website for those who were unable to join today. I would also like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to the stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in circle, the north, the west, the south, the eastern directions, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share the responsibilities with the caretakers of this land to ensure that the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We at the City of Markham are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. Thank you. If you are chiming in from a different treaty or territory, please feel free to say hello and just let us recognize where you're coming from in the chat box right now. And we will be sure to acknowledge that. So I'd like to thank you all for being here to share your perspectives and experiences with diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-Black racism, and also informing us at the City of Markham about the services that we provide. Your feedback will inform the development of the next 10 years of Markham's Diversity Action Plan to create a new and improved diversity action plan, as well as a piece that focuses on anti-Black racism in our community. In today's session, we will go over the key project deliverables, and we're excited to share some of the feedback that we've heard from our community consultations over the past month. We're grateful to all those who shared their perspectives and personal stories, very deeply personal stories as well, and we really appreciate that. All this information has been extremely valuable and will help us as we build principles towards building a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that is reflective of our community. You'll also have another opportunity to continue to share your feedback until the 12th of December on our survey. I would like to highlight that this is a safe space, and this is a safe space where you can share your perspectives. Each of us has a role to play in keeping this safe space. And this is how I would urge you to keep the safe space today, the space safe. Hold space for one another. In this conversation, I encourage you to share your own stories. Use I, me, my language when sharing, and share the space so that others may do the same. Allow for a full range of emotion for yourself and for others, and take care of your fellow participants during and after the session. Listen deeply. Also, let's be aware that the terrain that we're on may be uneven because everybody experiences inequities differently. So notice how and when you might be making assumptions of others. Every space has power imbalances and dynamics. So let's also be mindful how you may contribute or play into those dynamics. We're all in a place of learning. So let's be open to self-reflection. And even more importantly, let's be open to calling each other in. We ask that when you are speaking, please ensure that when we are speaking, that your audio is muted. To provide a comment, please use the hand raise button. And to do that, by doing that, we'll be able to see that you would like to provide a comment. During a question and answer portion, we ask that you use the Q&A box. If you'd also like to share a general message on the chat box, please feel free to do that. I would also like to mention that we have a trauma counselor on the line. Her name is Desiree Phillips. If you could just give us a wave. Please let Desiree know if at any point you would like to touch base with her for a health and wellness check, because we obviously understand that these conversations could be a little bit difficult. Desiree will also be available for up to an hour after this call if you would like to participate in a group debrief. Thank you. We could advance to the next slide, please. So we're all here today to talk about this new and exciting project, the Diversity Action Plan update that we've been participating in the past couple of weeks. Our objectives for this project could be summarized in these 3 actions here. We embarked on updating our plan to reflect actions for the next 10 years, and also very intentional about including plans to combat anti-Black racism in our community. We want to make sure that these plans reflect the experiences and the needs of Markham's diverse communities, and that are also reflective of every resident. And I'll shortly be talking about the different engagements that we've had in the community. We acknowledge that as our community grows, so will our plan. We also want to make sure that everybody is in clear understanding of what we're hoping to achieve collaboratively as a municipality. We want to use plain language in these plans as well, so that people can grasp and understand that this is something that they see themselves in. We want to focus on process, and we think about this process as a tree, and we've used the analogy of a tree, as you've seen in our logo, to represent the growth that we have as a community. The leaves also represent the shedding of the old and the incoming of the new, and the branches are representative of the partnerships that we're really hoping to anchor ourselves in the community. We will hope to monitor this plan in terms of follow-up, lots of touch points with clear responsibilities and key performance indicators. But we also recognize that we cannot do this without you as a city. Next slide, please. So this has been a little bit about the process this far. We've had discovery meetings, public consultations, and a survey. In our discovery meetings that were done internally, we spoke to the different commissions, community services, corporate services, development services, the office of the CAO, city councilors, and committees. We engaged with 5 committees that have a diversity, equity, and inclusion mandate. These are the Race Relations Committee, the Advisory Committee on Accessibility, the Seniors Advisory Committee, the Mayor's Youth Council, and the Mayor's Black Youth Liaison Committee. Very engaging and interesting discussions happened in these discussions. We also had 10 public consultations and 1 general meeting, which is today. The survey, available on markham.ca /diversity survey, is still open until the 12th of December. Next slide, please. So in terms of conversation, these are the different communities that we connected with, and we heard a variety of perspectives, including the Black and African diaspora and Caribbean communities, racialized, Indigenous, and racialized immigrant perspectives, Chinese community perspectives. We also heard from the 2S LGBTQ+ community, seniors, persons living with disabilities and mental health perspectives, youth perspectives, faith, religious and spiritual perspectives, community service agencies, sports, recreation, arts and culture, and last but not least, last night we met with economic empowerment perspective, business owners, entrepreneurs, and aspiring business owners. So as you can see, there's been quite a bit of work that's been done. But before we even jump into this, I would like to make a special introduction of some speakers, before inviting the Diversity Institute to take it away in sharing some of the key learnings. The first speaker that I would like to introduce is no stranger to all of you. However, I would like to highlight some of the things that you may or may not know about our mayor. Mayor Frank Scarpity was elected as the mayor of Markham in 2006, 2010, 2014, and 2018. He is Markham's longest serving mayor. He was first elected in 1985 as a regional councillor. Mayor Scarpity has a great sense of humor. He enjoys the outdoors, smiling, connecting with people, and he really has a great vision for our city to be connected, cohesive, and one where people can thrive and feel like they belong. Mayor Scarpity gives his time to a number of not-for-profit organizations related to health, social programs, arts, and culture. He is the co-chair of the Markham Stouffville Hospital's Capital Campaign. His efforts contributed to surpassing the hospital's $50 million fundraising goal. Mayor Scarpity led Markham's initiative to secure the Pan Am Center and to attract a Markham campus for York University, which we are all extremely excited about. He is a strong advocate for internet voting, and this has been used in Markham since 2003. Mayor Scarpity and his wife, Nancy, have 3 children. Mayor Scarpity, welcome to the platform.
Well, thank you very much, Joanne, for that long and kind introduction. But anyways, thank you for that. Ani, Bujo, Lehoma, Ni Hao, Namaste, Vanakam, Assalamu Alaikum, Shalom, Mabuhay, Benvenuto, Salam, Opa, Benvenu. Welcome, each and every one of you. I am really delighted to be here tonight to say what great work is being done by Joanne Kenya and truly the members of Markham staff, and of course the Diversity Institute for the launch and delivery of the updating of the Diversity Action Plan. It's been wonderful to hear how extensive the consultations have been, but more so, I think how meaningful they've been, where there has been direct dialogue, good questions being asked, and wonderful feedback. So lots of work has really gone into this plan, and it truly elevates the voices of Markham residents, but also that of service providers in our community, faith communities, and businesses. And the plan truly aligns with our strategic plan called Building Markham's Future Together, and the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, because this work is not just done here. I know there's many municipalities across Canada that are doing good work as well. I want to especially thank my colleagues on Markham Council. And given the format here tonight, I can't see them all, but I invite you to go to our website and see them there, and to also say that each and every one of them has supported the updating of the Diversity Action Plan, and they are committed to the plan and certainly to hearing all of the feedback from the consultations that we've been having. I also want to say a special welcome to the representatives from the Honorable Minister Mary Ng's office. Thank you for being here tonight. I know that Minister Ng couldn't be here, but I appreciate you taking time so that you'll be able to tell the minister some of the important work that's being done in her riding. I also want to say thank you to members of the senior leadership team who are joining us here tonight. I think your attendance truly reinforces the city's commitment. And in particular, I want to say thank you to Andy Taylor. You'll be hearing from him shortly, but fair to say, Joanne reports directly into the Chief Administrative Officer, and that to me is an indication of how important all of her work is in relation to everything else the city undertakes. And last but not least, I also want to extend a warm welcome to all of the community members that are here this evening. And I know many of you participated in the consultations over the past few weeks. And I want to say I am thankful for the way in which you've come forward and really demonstrated your commitment to refreshing our diversity action plan. We appreciate your support, your participation, your feedback, and this was all done as we continue to deal with the pandemic. So I know it's not been easy for individuals and organizations to stay connected and to be able to let all of your voices be heard this evening. I'd also like to say thank you to some of our advisory committees for their active engagement. As you heard, the Race Relations Committee, the Seniors and Accessibility Committee, the Mayor's Black Youth Liaison Committee, and the Mayor's Youth Council. And I am pleased that we'll be hearing from the chair of Markham's Race Relations Committee, Darius Suker, later in this session. Markham is proudly Canada's most diverse community. But you know, with that title, with that badge of honor, I think comes an awesome responsibility to ensure that each and every member of our community feels welcome, feels included, feels listened to, and can actively be engaged in the community. And by undertaking the refresh of this diversity action plan, we are signaling to the community that we here at the City of Markham take diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, and access to our programs and facilities very seriously. And that we are committed to ensuring that all voices are heard. We are listening. Throughout the month of November, we did host numerous consultations with a variety of stakeholder groups to listen and to learn, and most certainly to help inform the Diversity Action Plan update. We recognize that this process is a journey and one that we are extremely excited to embark on. We had consultations, as Joanne indicated, with Markham's Black African diaspora and the Caribbean communities, with faith and spiritual communities, hearing perspectives from both young people and our seniors, and listening to other racialized communities and the 2SLGBTQ community. We have engaged with a wide range of community members and groups. And I'm so pleased that we did that to ensure that we invited many who belong to several of those communities to participate in either one or more of the consultations. We have truly valued the feedback that we've received from all of you. And I also want to say that our partner, the Diversity Institute from the Ted Rogers School of Management, will take the themes of the online survey, the public consultation, and the internal discovery sessions that we had within our own organization and incorporate all of those into an updated diversity action plan report, which will be released in 2022. And as Joanne said, there is an online survey, and if you haven't done it yet, I do encourage you to take it, and you can do that right up until December the 12th at markham.ca/diversity action plan. Once again, thank you to all of you who've come out tonight. I know many of you, as I said, not only attended one or two sessions already. I appreciate you coming here, because as much as we wanted to hear from the individual groups and communities, we also wanted to share with all of you what we heard, because what we heard is truly important to moving forward with the Diversity Action Plan. And if I could, on behalf of Markham Council, just to take a moment to also wish you all the very best during the Christmas season. I hope you get a chance to enjoy some time with your family and friends, and that we also take this opportunity to learn from each other, because we do have a wonderful community, and all of the different traditions and cultures is our opportunity. It's our window on the world. There's no better place, I often say, than right here in the city of Markham to understand the world, because of the people that call Markham their home. And of course, all the best in the new year in 2022. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you, Mayor Scarpity, for those warm, welcoming remarks. I would also like to invite Andy Taylor, our CAO, to give his welcome. But before I do, for those people that don't know Mr. Taylor, this is his introduction. As a Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Markham, reporting to Mayor and Council, Andy Taylor leads the corporation with his executive leadership team comprised of the Commissioners of Community and Fire Services, Corporate Services, Development Services, the City Solicitor, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Markham, known as the high-tech capital of Canada, is a municipality of more than 350 residents centrally located in the Greater Toronto Area. It was the first municipality in North America to use the internet in binding elections in 2013. This is a great achievement, and Andy has been instrumental in introducing numerous e-government solutions, including the launch of the Markham portal website in June 2011. In 2017, Andy was elected as a fellow by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. He champions several local initiatives and sits on a number of board of directors of boards. Andy is also the president of the Markham Enterprises Corporation. Andy, welcome. The floor is yours.
Good evening, and thank you, Joanne, for your introduction. I am delighted to join you this evening for the culmination of a very comprehensive consultation process on the refresh to our diversity action plan. And I am very honored to lead a very deeply committed group of public servants here in the City of Markham as the Chief Administrative Officer. Equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, and access are important values and priorities here at the City of Markham. And earlier this year, we were delighted to have Joanne Kinya Baker join our organization, and she reports directly into myself as the Chief Administrative Officer. And this important initiative, this update to our Diversity Action Plan, now sits in the office of the CAO. The principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion are critical to our success and the growth of our organization. And it is incumbent on our organization to reflect the diverse communities we serve, as diversity is a core ingredient for a successful organization. In the last year, Markham staff have undertaken a comprehensive process to begin the refresh of our Diversity Action Plan. And this evening marks an important milestone along the way in strengthening, building Markham's Future Together strategic plan. And our approach to this work also aligns with the vision of the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, a vision to build communities where everyone has an equal chance in participating in its economic, political, social, cultural, and recreational life, and to thrive there. We are pleased to have been a signatory to this coalition since 2009. And following today's consultation, the Diversity Institute will review and analyze the feedback and present their report to the city in the new year. We are committed to making meaningful change within our organization so we can provide equitable and inclusive services. And led by our mayor and members of council, we recognize the importance of enacting positive change to better reflect the makeup of our community. And I look forward to listening to the lessons learned so far in this evening's presentation. So I want to thank everyone for attending and providing your feedback. And I also want to thank all those who have attended one of or all of the last 10 consultations. Your feedback is important. It's very appreciated and will help us build a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive city government. So thank you. Back to you, Joanna.
Thank you for the welcoming remarks, Andy. And just a reminder to everyone else in the gallery that we do have a person on staff who is our counselor for tonight, Desiree Phillips. Please feel free to reach out directly to Desiree if you need support anytime during this consultation. So the moment you've all been waiting for, the presentation on what we've heard so far. But before we get into it, I would like to introduce you to Nancy Mitchell, who will be our presenter on what we've heard so far for the night. Nancy is a Partnerships Development Officer and Research Associate at the Diversity Institute. Her background is on gender, equality, diversity, equity, inclusion, and she also previously worked at the United Nations Women Supporting the Women's Economic Empowerment Portfolio and Ending Violence Against Women's Portfolio. Nancy has attended all the consultations. She's been here, she's listened, she's supported, and today she will be sharing some really good information. Worth noting is Nancy is also part of the Prime Minister's Roundtable Youth Advisory. Nancy, we're really looking forward to having you share your insights so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanne. It's great to be here. And thanks so much to all the participants on the line. We really appreciate your honest feedback thus far over the course of the consultation period. So we had an opportunity to meet with both city councilors and staff, as well as community members. And we're excited to share some of the key feedback that we've heard thus far. So some of the key feedback we've received is the need for common values that frame the city's decision-making. And many of you said that tone from the top is important. When the city upholds common values, it encourages residents to do the same and has a positive impact on everyone feeling welcome and included. Some of the key values we heard during the consultations include accessibility, accountability, diversity, empathy, equity, inclusion, openness, representation, respect, and transparency. By adopting these general values when making city decisions and engaging with one another on a regular basis using these values in our daily lives, we promote cohesion and belonging. And we'd be thrilled to hear any additional values that you have that should be central to city decision-making later on during the presentation. In addition to some key values, we also heard some overarching themes, many of them being raised in multiple sessions, and they reflect some of your overall priorities. These include representation. Many of you flagged the need to identify overall gaps in diverse representation across the city. This means diverse representation among service and program providers and city staff, representation of diverse communities in leadership and at decision-making tables as well. You flagged that representation is important, but coupled with representation is the need for inclusion and ensuring that communities in all their diversity have a voice and that this voice is respected. We heard the need for intentional action and follow through. We know that the city has some amazing initiatives, and we also heard there's a need for these efforts to be action oriented, and that there are ways to measure this progress over time, and that progress is reported back to communities. We heard the need for allyship, particularly across communities, and the role that the city can play as a facilitator in making connections between communities. We know that allyship is important, and it's also important to have intersectional cohesion. And so the city can really facilitate opportunities for inter-community mingling, whether this is interfaith mingling, connections between youth and seniors, business networking opportunities, etc. We know that it's important for you to feel like you belong in the city, that others stick up for you in the city, that you're respected, and the city has a role to play in facilitating this. Similarly, many of you mentioned ongoing dialogue as a priority. Whether this is between residents in the city, some of the advisory committees and councils that Markham has, or among diverse communities, you flag the need for welcoming spaces for you to share your perspectives and experiences with one another and with the city. You also emphasize the importance of follow-up. When your perspectives are shared with the city, where do they go? Who deals with them? We know that open dialogue is crucial, and we know that it's most successful when you're able to hear the results of the feedback you've provided. We heard a lot about data. A lot of you said that what gets measured gets done. We need to know where you're at, what barriers exist for the communities across the city, what experiences you have in accessing services and programs, and are things getting better? Collecting baseline information with an intersectional lens and then continuing to collect this information on a regular basis helps the city understand what needs to be improved and what further opportunities there are for change. Collecting data on experiences, feelings, senses of belonging, etc., enforces transparency and accountability in remedying the barriers, but also strengthening successful efforts that already exist. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. We heard about city services and the need for them to be inclusive, equitable, and accessible. You raised the importance of feeling welcome when you use city services, ensuring that there are city services that meet the needs of you, your family, and your community, and that city service providers apply a diversity, equity, and inclusion approach in delivery. You also emphasize the need for both physical and virtual spaces in which city services are offered to be accessible. And I'd be happy to highlight some of your additional feedback a little bit later in the session. We heard a lot about inclusive communications. Many of you flagged that, hey, there are some great initiatives in the city, but you've never heard of them, and you don't know how to access them, and you don't know what exists for your community. You flagged the importance of meeting communities where they're at, whether this is sharing about initiatives on social media, putting up a flyer at a grocery store or at a community center or organization, ensuring that communications are translated into multiple languages. You also flagged that it's great for the city to communicate with you, but that you'd like regular opportunities to communicate back and share your insights, your inputs, your stories, and your experiences. This goes back to what we heard about dialogue and the importance of keeping channels open and regular. You raised staff training, which is an important component of ensuring that service delivery is inclusive. Ensuring that there's consistent frameworks based on diversity, equity, inclusion, and the values I mentioned earlier, and that all service providers can rely on these and have a common language on these, ensures that the services that you're getting are not only welcome, but they're consistent across the city. Something you mentioned, and I think it's a really umbrella concept that covers all of the themes we've talked about, is proactive leadership and community partnership. You mentioned wanting to speak openly about diversity, equity, inclusion, to be proactive in taking steps to address discrimination, and to continue to partner with communities and organizations. We know that many positive relationships already exist, and we heard the need for these to be strengthened between you and the city. You can go to the next slide, thanks. So as we work to take all of your feedback and begin developing the diversity action plan, we recognize the need to embed this plan into city efforts that already exist so that we can ensure that the plan lives on. We're working on anchoring this plan within the city strategic plan so that the two don't exist separately, but they exist to reinforce one another. Your city's strategic plan is based on 4 key pillars. The first is exceptional services by exceptional people. The second is engaged, diverse, thriving, and a vibrant city. The third is safe, sustainable, and complete community. And the fourth is stewardship of money and resources. And for the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to go through the feedback that you've provided and try to align them under these pillars. So the diversity action plan will include a plan to eliminate anti-Black racism. And we know that the mayor has done a ton of outreach initiatives to seek feedback from the Black community. And we also really appreciate the people who have taken their time to share your stories and your perspectives with us. Pillar 1 of the city's strategic plan focuses on service delivery and includes considerations like how services are communicated, how feedback is sought, who's delivering your services, etc. Something we heard is the need to enhance feelings of belonging and feelings of being welcome when accessing services. Many of you shared some really tangible things you think could help, including training the city staff and service providers on anti-Black racism, collecting race-based data to understand what barriers to service access are experienced by the Black community, ensuring that the Black community see themselves reflected in staff, but also in leadership roles, and streamlining communication between Black communities, organizations, and City Council. You also mentioned looking at city policies with an anti-Black racism lens and understanding how policies in practice impact the Black community. So this is for both policies that are existing, but also new policies as well. Next slide. Pillar 2 focuses on ensuring engaged, diverse, thriving, and complete communities. Many of you flagged the importance of the Black community in all its diversity, feeling welcome and having opportunities to engage with one another, foster allyship with one another, etc. Many of you recognize that the city puts on annual celebrations for the Black community, and this is great. However, more regular educational and cultural celebrations, talks, workshops are needed, coupled with educational efforts on Black culture, but also anti-Black racism, and spaces for the Black community to engage in dialogue with one another and with other communities as needed. Many of you also flagged the need for affordable recreational programming and after-school initiatives that are specific to the Black community. And you shared with us some examples of past programs that made you and your families feel welcome and included. We also had discussions on entrepreneurship and business development, and many of you mentioned the need for specific supports for Black business owners, earmarking funding for Black entrepreneurs, and funding for organizations that are supporting Black communities. You mentioned providing programming for Black youth entrepreneurs, including mentorship, internship, and sponsorship opportunities, and ensuring that the Black community is considered in city procurement contracts. Next slide. Pillar 3 focuses on safe and sustainable and complete communities, and this includes considerations like housing and transportation, for example. You shared with us the importance of ensuring that you feel safe in the city, the importance of addressing stereotypes and prejudice, and the need for the city to be proactive in efforts to speak up against and openly against anti-Black racism that occurs in Markham, but also regionally and within the country as a whole. You flagged the importance of developing a clear understanding of housing and transportation needs of the Black community, including where these services ought to be developed and their affordability for the Black community. You emphasized the importance of seeing the Black community reflected in emergency services of the city and an opportunity for emergency services to recruit diverse staff and provide Black youth opportunities to engage in programming. Next slide. Pillar 4 emphasizes resource management and transparency. During our sessions, you mentioned funding for Black-focused organizations to increase service delivery. You also mentioned developing a clear budget to support efforts to eliminate anti-Black racism, whether this is funding to support the portfolio at large or funding to support a specific team working on anti-Black racism. In general, you emphasize the need for budgeting for the Black community to be transparent, that financial supports are promoted openly, and that diverse procurement and vendor networks are supported and promoted. Next slide. Moving on to the general feedback we've heard through our consultations and meetings on the Diversity Action Plan. As mentioned, Pillar 1 focuses on service delivery. And within this, a key priority we've heard is service inclusion and accessibility. Many of you mentioned that the city has great services, but they're not evenly dispersed around the city, which poses a barrier for you when accessing them. Many of you also mentioned the need to ensure that physical and virtual spaces are accessible, whether this is ensuring that business codes are up to date on accessibility standards, or virtual services and programming includes technology tools that support accessibility. You also mentioned service consistency and common understandings of diversity and equity and inclusion in their delivery. Many of you said that sometimes when you access services, it feels like there's a strong knowledge of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that this should be widespread across the city so that you're getting consistent delivery and services. Many of you shared the importance of data collection and understanding who uses the services, how often, and whether people think that the services are effective and welcoming. Next slide. During our meetings, you flagged the importance of seeing yourself reflected in the individuals providing city services. Markham is an extremely diverse city, as mentioned, and it's important for the city staff and their service providers to match the same diversity. You shared with us some ideas on how representation could be achieved. For example, looking at HR policies, including recruitment, hiring, retention, and leadership roles. You emphasize the importance of having staff that speak many languages that can support you in accessing and delivering services, answering your questions, etc. And you emphasize diversity and inclusion in leadership roles and ensuring that the voices of diverse communities and diverse staff are respected. Next slide. Okay, we heard the importance of communication in both existing and new initiatives. You flagged that a first step in accessing services and participating in initiatives is simply knowing they exist. We heard of the importance of ensuring that communications are channeled through different platforms and using organizations to assist in promoting opportunities. We know that communication is a two-way street and residents should have the opportunity to communicate back with the city. You said that you would like opportunities and spaces to provide input on decisions that the city makes before they're made, and then opportunities to provide feedback and consultation on existing initiatives. You mentioned surveys and meetings and Instagram polls and tons of other really amazing and tangible ways that the city can connect with you to get your insights. You flagged a streamlined approach for sharing complaints or things that need to be fixed. When a sidewalk is cracked, who do residents go to ensure that it's fixed? What's the appropriate body for taking that? If there's an instance of discrimination, how is this addressed? Opportunities for you to ensure that issues get addressed in a timely manner and that open dialogue is promoted. Next slide. Across all efforts, you shared with us the need for services and communications to be in languages that you speak and understand. You said that the city does make an effort to have communication in multiple languages, but there's a streamlined need to ensure that translation is included across all services and also all communications. This ensures that all residents of Markham have access to the same information and can participate in all city initiatives. Next slide. Okay, moving on to Pillar 2. As mentioned, Pillar 2 focuses on ensuring an engaged, diverse, and complete society. Ensuring social cohesion and allyship really begins with a widespread understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a common language, and a shared vision. Many of you expressed the need for educational and awareness efforts to ensure that people know the history of racism and discrimination, and also how this is being experienced currently in the city. You shared with us some amazing programs hosted at the library, at community centers, at the museum, and you shared with us some ways that these spots can promote education and awareness efforts. You flagged the need to understand what people already know. Do residents and staff have the same baseline understanding? What gaps in knowledge exist? Do people use the same terminology when they're talking about issues? Finding ways to understand what knowledge people already have helps us understand how we can move forward. Slide. Coupled with efforts for education and awareness are efforts for celebrating the different cultures of Markham. Many of you said that you appreciate the city's efforts for cultural celebration, including the Faces of Markham, Black History Month, Pride, etc. But you said it'd be great to have these celebrations and opportunities and spaces for dialogue more regularly. You emphasize the need for people of all backgrounds and identities to feel welcome in joining in on celebrations, and to encourage them to engage with one another and learn from one another. You shared some events that you've attended in the past or elsewhere in the region that can be used to promote social cohesion and allyship that you think that Markham could replicate. And overall, encouraging dialogue between communities and within communities is crucial for ensuring that people feel seen, welcome, and respected. Next slide. During our meetings and consultations, we discussed many city programs related to recreation, arts, culture, and sports. And we've heard great things about the Pan Am Center for its accessibility features and as a hub for offering a variety of different sports. We also heard that you love that sports and programs and services are offered in different pockets of the city, but these need to be streamlined throughout. We heard that programs need to be affordable and that the city can share what subsidies or financial supports are available. We heard a lot about the trails and parks of the city, and they're a great way for you to get out and get moving, but that these need to be accessible. So we've heard things like benches, washrooms, adequate lighting, wheelchair accessibility, and some really tangible things that can be incorporated into these spaces so that you can fully enjoy them. Many of you expressed the need for both general and also community-specific recreational programs, whether this is programming for Black youth, opportunities for older members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community to engage with one another, African drumming, senior coffee chats, etc. You shared with us some of the difficulties you've experienced establishing a business in Markham, but you also shared with us some ways the city can help. You said things like supporting youth entrepreneurs in programming and developing a business directory or physical welcoming spaces and marketplaces for diverse vendors. You flagged the need for networking opportunities for business owners in all of their diversities and plazas and malls that are welcoming for all types of businesses. You highlighted ways that the city can highlight funding for entrepreneurs, include city supports and financial resources. And you mentioned data collection on the type of businesses in Markham and the supports that entrepreneurs need. Excellent. Pillar 3 focuses on community safety, emergency services, planning, housing, and transportation. We heard a ton about inclusive and accessible housing. This starts with affordability for different groups of people at all different income levels. You also mentioned the need for a variety of different homes, including transitional housing for seniors, multi-generational homes, housing for students, and housing that has accessibility features, including elevators, amenities on the first floor, not as many stairs needed to get up into the actual building, etc. In addition to housing, you mentioned bylaws that support the different types of homes and parking, general information and awareness on the bylaws of the city so that residents all have a common understanding of what's expected and how it's enforced. You flagged transportation, roads, and sidewalks, and we heard stories of people not being able to access shops because a sidewalk is cracked, for example, not having enough time to cross the street because the crosswalk countdown isn't long enough, and that you have to travel all around the city for the amenities that you and your family need. We heard things like walkability, different methods of transportations like subway, buses, biking, walking, etc. Many of you also mentioned having amenities close to transportation hubs. That way, after work, you can easily grab your groceries and head home. Overall, we heard affordability and accessibility of transportation, and we heard that you want transportation and housing developed in tandem so that they match one another's needs. During our meetings, we heard some initiatives that relate to emergency services, namely the fire department and the great work they're doing to engage youth in their programming. Many of you mentioned the need for greater awareness on initiatives like this or other initiatives that emergency services are providing, as well as ensuring that emergency service providers are trained in diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and that the service providers of emergency services are diverse themselves. We've heard other feedback related to safety and sustainability, and we'd be happy to hear additional thoughts in the survey or later on during today's session. Pillar 4 emphasizes resource management. Many of you said that all of these initiatives are great, but it'd be best if they were backed by a budget or funding allocations. You emphasize providing grants to organizations that support diverse communities, having a budget for anti-racism or an anti-racism team or an ombudsman office, having a budget for the anti-racism or diversity, equity, and inclusion portfolio in general, and ensuring that a percentage of the city's procurement is given to local diverse vendors and others. Further, you said that the city can play a role in providing information on how to access financial funding, how to access subsidies, grants for businesses, etc. And overall, you said that you want budgeting and fiscal allocation to be transparent and that there to be accountability. Overall, we heard a ton of great feedback on the ways that the city can best support you and your community. You provided us a ton of stories and your lived experiences, and you've given us some really tangible actions and examples that we can use for reference when building the plan. This has been a great experience to engage with you all, and we really look forward to having more of your feedback during today's session, but also in the survey that's available until December 12th. So thanks so much for participating in the process. We appreciate it. Over to you, Joanne.
Thank you, Nancy, for giving us that incredible, comprehensive review of what the community has said. I know there's lots of our leaders and council on the line who are listening and taking notes. But we also have community members, and I would like to introduce one of our community members to give some commentary before we get into the questions and feedback portion of the night. And so, Darius, I would like to invite you to the stage for your commentary. But before you do, I want the community to know who you are, because we value you as such an integral part of our community, Darius. So Darius Suker is the president of Enteliki, designed to empower organizations and serve communities through relationship building, inclusion, and government relations. Darius is an award winner and goal-oriented leader, I can attest to that, who cares deeply about social justice and Canadian innovation. Most notably, Darius received an honorary certificate in governance essentials from Ryerson University and recognition from the City of Markham for his civic engagement. Darius is driven by a quest for inclusion and is fueled by the love of people. Darius is a proud Markham resident and is also the chair of the Race Relations Committee. Darius, welcome.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Joanna. I most sincerely appreciate it. It's my honor to speak to you tonight. Hello and good night, everyone. I bring greetings on behalf of the City of Markham's Race Relations Committee, where we not only tolerate diversity, but we choose to celebrate it together. Our committee is mandated to advise the city and council with best practices and opportunities to improve ethno-cultural equity. We are composed of community members from different places and spaces who have dedicated our time to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion for everyone. We have actively pushed for anti-racist policies, more inclusive communications, and worked on our annual event in partnership with the city, the Many Faces of Markham. When I was thinking about what I'd like to share tonight, I thought about the message that I wanted to leave behind. The reason the Diversity Action Plan is important to me is because my communities are important to me. I've grown up in Markham and spent over 24 years here. I went to Copper Glen, Boxford Public School when it first opened, and Middlefield Collegiate Institute. I've been to all the schools for games, events, and even work. Growing up here, my friends and I have shared dim sum, jerk chicken, curry, sushi, kotu roti, chili chicken, and everything in between. We've also shared family, literally shared our families together, and friends together. We've shared crazy stories, funny stories, and even painful stories. It's beautiful in Markham, but we know that it's not always sunshine and rainbows for everyone, especially not all of the time. With less than $200 in their pockets, my parents and I immigrated to Canada in 1989. Without having any family, community support, or other forms of human capital to rely on, we moved from place to place in search of work, but more importantly, a sense of belonging. And ever since I can remember, I have always wanted to help others feel good about who they are and where they are. When I was younger, I wasn't always comfortable in my skin. I had this one incident in kindergarten where a little girl who didn't look like me say to me that she did not want to play with me because I was dirty, which didn't make much sense to me because my parents always kept me nice and clean. However, incidents like this made me think about my dark brown skin from time to time. And I remember thinking that I wanted to be something different than what I was. I can even remember thinking that I wanted to be white. So when I think about Markham, my beautiful friends and family, the diverse groups of people, and especially the younger children, I want to envision a Markham that is welcoming, loving, and kind to everyone. I want to see a Markham where little brown boys like me feel happy with the skin that they're in. I want to see a space where everyone is celebrated because of their color, culture, sexual orientation, gender, race, ability, religion, and everything else that makes us unique and different and special. I envision a space where we see ourselves reflected in administration, in the police force, in fire services, in schools, in businesses, and in other community institutions. I envision a place where no child has to feel like I once did. I want young people and everyone to be comfortable and welcomed for who they are. And we can only have a city that feels this way when everyone is included. We need allyship. We need anti-racist policies and people. We need to hear the stories of the people within the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. We need change. We need a diversity action plan that is up to date, that reflects community needs and voices, and that honors those that came before us. And we need all these things to make Markham greater, safer, and prosperous for all of our communities. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to the City of Markham and Mayor Frank Scarpitti, the Diversity Institute and Wendy Suker, Nancy Mitchell, Stephanie Dye, Councillor Isa Lee, Joanne Kenya Baker, Mona Nazif, Andy Taylor, Vice Chair Nandi Kumar, and the members of the Race Relations Committee in engaging in meaningful work to help advance equity in Markham. We look forward to using the results of the Diversity Action Plan as a way to create outcomes and improve accountability regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion for Markham. Thank you for your time today and appreciate it so very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius. That was very well said. Thank you for the reminders and thank you for the story. Thank you for reminding us that behind all these experiences are real people with real stories. So we're going to move on to the question and answer section of the night. But before I do that, I would like to invite Dr. Wendy Suker to lead us through this section. Dr. Suker has been the lead on this project and has a phenomenal, fantastic team that she's working with. As you've seen today, they've worked really hard to pull this together, and it's been a great partnership that we formed with the Diversity Institute. Dr. Wendy Suker is the Diversity Institute founder, academic director, and the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and Research Lead of the Future Skills Center. She is a co-author of a bestseller. She also leads 100 research staff, and part of those staff have been heavily involved in our project as well. The Diversity Institute has over 100 staff and associates from all around the world, 200 partners, and focuses on dimensions of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, future skills, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Harnessing the power of innovation, it promotes the advancement of underrepresented groups. Dr. Wendy Suker has been recognized with the Harry Jerome Diversity Award, the Bob Marley Award, the Canada-Pakistan Business Council Females Professional of the Year, the Metropolis Research Award, the CADA Alliance, Sarah Kirky Award for Entrepreneurship, and also notably, Dr. Suker has been noted as one of 100 most powerful women by WXN. She was recently named a WCA Women of Distinction and one of the International Women's Forum 2020 Who Make a Difference. She is a woman of influence. And as you can see, Dr. Suker has really incredible credentials, but not only that, she has great leadership and a team behind her. So, Dr. Suker, I pass this along to you for the question and answer and the feedback from the community that will be live. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And it's definitely a pleasure to be here and We've really appreciated the frank and open discussions that we've had with many community members. I will start by saying this session really is intended to give you a snapshot of what we heard. Obviously, having run probably about 100, close to 100 hours of consultations with different groups, it's challenging to try to summarize everything into a half-hour presentation. And that's why this session is very important, as is the survey. And already in the chat, I've seen notes that perhaps we haven't emphasized certain aspects or issues enough. And we're taking note of all of those comments, but trust us, we have many, many, many pages of comments and transcripts. And we're going to do our best to try to ensure that people feel included and their views reflected in the discussion. And there will be opportunities to, as I said, to provide written comments if we run out of time tonight. I wanted to start with